I'm Rachel Brook and I'm from Jim's Conveyancing. Today we're going to talk about available first home buyer incentives to help you get into the property market here in Australia. More specifically, we're going to focus on what's available in Victoria. As I'm Victorian based, I'm only licensed to practice in Victoria, and also my mortgage broking friend here, Mita, is based in Melbourne. So we're just going to more focus on that. But first things first, tell us about you and what you do.
I'm a mortgage broker based in Victoria. My office is in Epping, and I've got clients all over Australia.
All over Australia. Now, that all sounds very impressive, but what percentage of your client base are first home buyers?
I have got, I would say, roughly around 80% as first home buyers at the moment, because from last, I would say, 6 to 8 months, we've seen an influx of first home buyers. There are so many benefits available for first home buyers, which we'll definitely discuss later.
So I guess it's not even really an investor's market anymore. Definitely, even in my own client base as well. I think actually that's a fair, if not, I'd probably say about 90% of my work at the moment is just first home buyers. And exactly what you said is because there's a lot of available incentives, and, you know, the Australian government's been under a lot of pressure to, you know, not only incentivize, but to facilitate first home buyers to get into the market, as really what we've been talking about all day, which is, you know, the notion that I'm a young person, I'm a first home buyer, but I'm just not even going to bother, and I'm just going to sit in the rental trap because that's easier rather than trying to get into the market. But we're here to help you understand that actually there's not only government initiatives, but even from a financing perspective as well, you know, concessions, initiatives, all sorts of different solutions to help you, you know, not give up, but to try and get into the market, because there are options available.
And there's always light at the end of the tunnel, as we all say.
That's true. Exactly right. But first things first, I think one of the things that we should more talk about is, so there's, if anything, a huge, what has really seen a rush of first home buyers to get into the market is what's referred to as the First Home Owners Grant.
Definitely.
I'm sort of hoping that you could tell us what that means and the process behind applying for the grant.
Okay. So the First Home Owners Grant is a grant given by the government if you are buying a newly built property, or you're building a new home for a value up to $750 or below. The grant is
$750,000.
$750,000 or below. The grant is for $10,000, and that can be used towards your contribution, and that can either be used at the time of settlement or towards your base payment to the builder.
Okay, so first things first, let's just break it down. So from an eligibility perspective, be a PR or an Australian citizen to get the grant?
Definitely. You have to be over the age of 18.
Yep.
You have to be a permanent resident or an Australian citizen. And the most important thing is you have to be a first home buyer.
Right. Now, okay, I'm an applicant coming to you. I see the grant available, right? Is this so obviously we're talking about construction. So first things first, do I need to find land to start the process, or can I actually go to a builder first and get into a building contract, or do you need both at the same time to have the grant released to you for the $10,000?
Okay. You need a build contract to get the $10,000 First Home Owners Grant, because most of the banks will only release the funds after the slab is poured.
Right. Okay. So going back, so there's two options, right, for the grant to be released. You either come to you with a land and a building contract already set in place, so we're actually in that contract leading up to settlement, and we're in the finance stage, or from what you've told us that we can settle on the land first, and then exactly what you said, if we're in stage one of the new build, right, and you can prove that, then that grant can be released to you.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's two options there.
There's a third option as well.
Okay.
The $10,000 grant is also available for newly built houses. The condition is that nobody should have lived in the house. The house should have never sold in the past. So you should be the first owner of the property.
Right. In terms of, as well, so we've applied for this grant. By the way, for further information, when applying for it, right? So let's go back to the application process. Common questions that I get, is it something that I need to apply for in my stamp duty forms, or is it something that you apply directly through the bank and the application? Can you just explain that?
Sure. So as a broker, what I do is I'll fill up the first homeowners grant application form for you, get it signed by you, and then send it to the bank. The bank will send it to the state revenue office, and the grant will be then passed on to the bank. In some cases, if you want, you can pay for the $10,000 from your pocket to start with as a contribution, and then the first homeowners grant can be paid directly to your account.
So in terms of the first homeowners grant as well, has the Australian government released any sort of information in terms of how long this grant is going to be available? Or am I looking into a crystal ball in terms of...
The crystal ball is quite foggy at the moment, so it's really hard for me to see as well what's upcoming. But looking at states like Queensland, where the first homeowners grant currently is $30,000, who knows what's to come in the next financial year? Wait and watch.
Yeah. So, all right, perfect. So I think that we've really covered the, first homeowners grant. Are there any other initiatives or incentives available for first home buyers at the moment?
There are heaps of them. There is another initiative which is called as the First Home Guarantee. The eligibility criteria for the First Home Guarantee scheme is you should be a first home buyer or have not owned a property in the last 10 years. You should be over the age of 18. If you're a sole applicant, your income cannot be over $125,000. And if you are a joint applicant, the income cannot go over $200,000. You have to be a permanent resident or an Australian citizen to be eligible for the scheme.
What's the purpose of this scheme? What does it actually do?
So basically, if you're borrowing more than 20%, you need to have a deposit between 5% to 20%. So the benefit of the scheme is normally when you go to a bank, the bank will only lend you up to 80% of the property value, and if they are lending you more than 80%, they will be charging you a once-off fee, which is called as the lender's mortgage insurance. This is a government initiative scheme where the government is jumping in and basically offering to pay off the lender's mortgage insurance for you. You as a client won't be paying the lender's mortgage insurance. You just need a minimum of 5% deposit saved into your account for a minimum of 3 months with most of the lenders. There are some lenders that will take the genuine savings for a month as well. So the beauty is you don't end up paying the lender's mortgage insurance, and you can get away buying the property with just minimum 5% plus the fees and charges. The other schemes which are available is called as a family guarantee scheme. Family Home Guarantee Scheme is an Australian government initiated scheme to help single parents or legal guardian buy a property with just minimum 2% deposit. To be eligible for the scheme, you should be a permanent resident or an Australian citizen. You should be a single parent or a guardian with one dependent staying with you, and should have not earned more than $125,000. So you can get into your property with just 2% deposit. You don't need to save up for 5%, and it's really hard for single parents to keep on saving and have a big saving to get into their first home or get into your property. So you can either buy an established property, or you can either build a home as well.
Great. You mentioned 3. Are there any other initiatives currently available?
Yes, there is regional guarantee scheme as well. So this guarantee scheme is available for people living in regional Victoria. It is quite similar to the first home guarantee scheme, where you need minimum 5% genuine savings, and you have to be an Australian citizen or permanent resident. But the most important thing is you have to be living in regional Victoria for a minimum of 12 months. There are income thresholds for all the government initiated schemes. So please get in touch with a broker or me just to get more information.
Great. So I've just heard a lot of available initiatives and incentives currently being offered by the Australian government in which your local mortgage broker or meter will be able to help you out with in terms of understanding whether you're eligible, also understanding the benefits. But I think really when looking at getting financing, it's good to do your research in terms of, understanding the eligibility as well, because really these initiatives, what they work to do is to give you an elevation in terms of getting into the market. Now, there's obviously from the financing side, all of the incentives which are currently available to get you into the property market. But obviously, when you buy a property, unfortunately, it sucks, but we've got to pay taxes. And part of that, and what I'll talk about as well, which we haven't covered, is common costs when purchasing a property. Notoriously, the most unpopular one is stamp duty, right? And without getting political or controversial, really what stamp duty used to be was the old titles office used to stamp the file. I'm too young to know what they did. But anyway, long story short, that's another cost when purchasing property. Another one as well is referred to as lodgement fees. We've named two, and obviously you've got your bank fees, you've got your legal costs as well, for what you're paying me for. But let's talk about, because obviously stamp duty is a huge hurdle for first home buyers, right? And part of where the conveyancer really comes in, so a mortgage broker will give you a general understanding as to how much stamp duty you're going to pay based on the value of the property in which you have in mind, right? But what the conveyancer does in the process when applying for stamp duty is that we actually prepare the forms on your behalf, right? Part of our job as well is that we explore available concessions. What a concession is, just for your understanding when it comes to stamp duty, is just ways in terms of having a look at available concessions at ways of reducing the amount of stamp duty that you pay. Now, obviously stamp duty can be a huge hurdle as it can go into the tens, if not hundreds of thousands for some properties, right? But I want to talk about what's currently on offer, which is the first home buyer's duty concession. And really, I think, obviously I know the ins and the outs of the eligibility, but since you've been so great at sharing with us all of the eligibility, can you please tell us how the first home buyer's duty concession applies?
So if you are a first home buyer and you're buying an established property which is below $600,000, you are not paying any stamp duty, right? But if you're buying a property between $600,000 to $750,000, you will be getting a concession on the stamp duty. And Rachel will tell you about, there's a percentage of concession, and Rachel will tell you more about how the concession works.
In terms of to be eligible for those, for the concession, you must be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident that has not purchased property before in Australia. And as well, it needs to be your principal place of residence. So basically what that means is that it can't be an investment property. You have to live in the property for up to 12 months. Now, if you lie about that, there's a possibility of being audited by the State Revenue Office. And this is why it's really important to follow the rules, because if you're audited and they find out that you've applied for this concession, you're not actually living in the property and it being your principal place of residence, they catch you doing that, they'll demand that you pay the stamp duty back. But that's the eligibility, but really from a cost-saving exercise, it's a great way to save tens of thousands of dollars on what you have to pay on top of your normal costs when purchasing a property.
Do you know the beauty about the concession on the first home, the stamp duty as well? If you're buying a land and construction, if your land is below $600,000, so you pay zero stamp duty. So the eligibility for land is the land cannot be more than $600,000, and you can get away with paying $0 stamp duty. Your bill can be $500,000. Your land can be $600,000. The total project would be $1.1 million, and you will pay $0 stamp duty.
Wow. I should know that, but I didn't know that myself. So we've talked a lot about, there's so many, honestly, it's like walking into a grocery shop. There's so many different concessions and initiatives on the shelf, right? So,
but as a broker, we can work out what's the option that's going to fit you, your needs, your requirements the best.
Yep, absolutely. And that's why you have to come see a broker first when starting your property search. Now, lastly, as a question, because obviously we're going with the current trend of what's topical in property, which is I'm a young person, I can't get into the market, so why even bother? Other than those initiatives, grants and concessions that are available to reduce the price of purchasing a property, do you have any sort of general advice that you'd like to talk about in order to help people get into the market?
See, it's always good to watch your expenses and be good at savings. To increase your borrowing capacity, it's good to have none or very less liabilities, specifically credit cards. That can really bring your borrowing capacity further down. Any car loans, any personal loans, it's always good to close all your debts prior to applying for your home loan. So that will increase your borrowing capacity.
So any other advice other than having a good savings and tackling down debt?
Speak to a mortgage broker, check what's the maximum borrowing capacity. It's always good to check what your maximum borrowing or how you can maximize your borrowing capacity.
Right. Well, we've spoken a lot today about available government initiatives, concessions on stamp duty. Really, it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach when looking at the financial side and the legal side of purchasing a property. So touch base with your local mortgage broker and also touch base with could be a lawyer or conveyancer and explore those options available at mitigating the stamp duty that you have to pay. And, there's a reason why these initiatives and incentives are available, because we're not only here as professionals, but also, broadly speaking, there's a lot to help you get into the market. Either way, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's been absolutely marvellous and wonderful. And, you've shared a lot of insight in terms of the available grants from a financing perspective. And I'm sure, a lot of people out there could use your assistance with exploring those, eligibility criteria and how they could meet it. So definitely touch base with Mita, and thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for inviting me over. It's been a pleasure, and I have always enjoyed working with Rachel.